All right, now you guys have got me thinking about a lot of different things now. So you talked about your event just as a general experience, but I'd really like to hear about some of the practical uh, behind the scenes kinds of things that you have to look at. I know we talked about like the flow of the crowd and how you get them in the building, how you sign people up, and how you manage the experience once it's happening. Can you both talk a little about that? Linda, you might want to take this one and talk a little bit about those sensory totes and when and how they're used.
Sure. So as stated, we have these sensory totes that are common to all of our sensory consortium institutions. And they all have both like a timer and a binocular set and fidgets. They have like these bands that indicate red or green, if they're wanting to engage with others or not. In addition to that, though, we each have our sensory story, our social story, which is our success story. So if they came to visit our space, they could anticipate by prepping and looking at that before they came, in addition to all of the activities that they could anticipate in doing in our spaces, whether it's a dot-to-dot activity, a word search, or a scavenger hunt. There's just this wide array of activities that they can choose if they're wanting something more active or something more fine-tuned and looking like doing a sketching activity with a timer. We're kind of leaving it open-ended for them to be self-directed and figure out what thing is best for them. But that social or success story is really key so that people can be ready and know what to anticipate. I know, Emily, you have a bunch of things also that you offer. Could you share a few of them?
Sure. So, in thinking about the social story or the success story, those are also so important before our really large scale events, our kind of pre COVID Sensory Day events. We've gotten feedback from parents that, we send those in an email as soon as people register for our event. And parents have said that they will, every night before the event, go over the social story with their child so that they are prepared, or we'll laminate it and make it into a placemat
Oh,
so
that's
that
fun.
they look at it, during dinner. Um, so I think just helping people to know what to expect when they, come to the museum or to any of our events, and then thinking about how do we make that as smooth of an experience as possible, like flow of traffic, registering, when you get into the museum. And something that really helps with that is the help from TWU students. So as I mentioned, we sometimes have, about 500 people that come to the events. And luckily they don't all show up at once, but we do sometimes have a little bit of bottlenecking at those events. So we have the TWU students who are working at that event, that we probably have around 30 for each event, and they're spread out at different activities at the registration table, so that as soon as someone arrives at the museum, they can welcome them into the space as they guide them up into the interactive area, kind of give them an explanation of all of the things that are happening, answer any questions that they have, and help them get started too. So I think that's one of the kind of logistical things that we figured out over the years that's been a really big help. In addition, when people come into the check-in table, we always welcome them and give them some sort of fidget. So normally it's just like like those Mardi Gras beaded necklaces, but something that's like a gift to welcome them to the event, but that they can also hold on to if they're feeling a little bit nervous.
There's a couple of things that have popped into my mind as you guys are talking, and some of the unexpected things that happen are the social story or success story actually can help the parents, because we made an assumption that the parents knew what to do. And I can vividly recall one of the dads walking around in the event at the Dallas Museum of Art saying, well, where's the coffee? Because he just imagined himself strolling through the museum with a cup of coffee. And we were like, well, it's across the street for when you go to the park after this is over. You know, I mean, we're trying to say it in a nice way, but we realize that some of the parents hear about the events, but they're not familiar with the culture of the museums or the zoos or whatever kind of cultural venues. Another factor that I think has happened over time is that we have discovered that there's a large church in the Dallas area, and one of their ministries is to help people with intellectual disabilities. But what we realized during the events, and the helper will have on a vest, but we realized that the helper doesn't really know the person that they're working with either. And sometimes supervision becomes confusing as to who is supposed to put the brakes on a behavior that could be dangerous or disruptive, that they assume we're going to do that, and we assume they're going to do that. And so I think that is a constant challenge, that these events just need to have enough people who are in charge and can manage those things comfortably so that that doesn't become difficulty. Linda, are there other things related to your place that are just sort of logistical matters to think about?
Absolutely. So obviously with the valet parking, there can be a little bit of a bottleneck there, like you said. So we have a table with an activity there right as they're coming in or as they're leaving, if they have a wait time at all. And then as they walk into our space, they're greeted as they are with Emily's, where they receive all of the materials that are available for them that day. And I love Emily's idea of the dots as they're leaving, kind of as that little survey at the end. But we also have signage that we put near our sculptures that indicates very clearly, like red, please don't touch, or green, like this place, you can sit on this. This is open for you to enjoy, making everything very clear and very orderly in this space. Each of our sensory partners has a table, and they're clearly marked as to what the station and what the activity is named, so that people can find them very readily and engage with that. And they're spaced kind of all throughout the garden so that they're not so close together that, like you said, we don't have huge bottlenecks there, but also to kind of reduce the sound or other distractions that they may experience otherwise. And we try to have the gross motor or the large, movement pieces or activities away from those that are more detailed oriented, so that those that are wanting a quieter space can easily find those areas. In addition to like the Dallas Library that does their story time, that's in the amphitheater or the terraced area, again, away from the other sounds, so it's not a distraction. So we think very consciously about the sounds and ambient things that are happening in this space, and also those activities that would generate those noises, so that they can have the most successful experience with that activity.
Linda, something else that I was really impressed by with the Nashers events, since you do offer, that snack time in your afternoon events, I was really impressed by the fact that you were thinking about kind of issues of comorbidity or like digestive issues or food allergies that are pretty common with autism too. So like for your, when you made s'mores, I know that you had gluten-free graham crackers available too, or that the modeling dough that you use at activities is gluten-free. So I think those little logistical bits really make a big difference for the event too.
Yeah, we want to make sure that parents don't have to worry about all those issues. If we're going to offer it, we want it to be as safe for as many as possible. And as you know, our audiences, many do have gluten allergies. And again, we just want to be sensitive to that.
I think one, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think one other thing that is important for us is that, so our event normally happens first thing in the morning before the museum opens. So we start at 9 a.m. and the museum doesn't open until 11 a.m. So we have, several hours of a private event our visitation time for these activities. But we also really want to encourage people to stay and to explore the museum when it opens and explore all of the other activities that become available, like activities in the gallery, through our pop-up art spot, or tours, story times that are just part of our, day-to-day offerings. We are really trying to think about this as being a welcoming time for families, understanding that, there's a lot of threshold fear that one can experience when going to a place for the first time, or I think just that anyone going to a museum for the first time can be a little bit anxious about it and understanding the expectations. But we're really not trying to segment this population away from our general public. We're just, really trying to create a warm welcome and then encourage them to stay and explore as they get comfortable.
Yeah, we tried, just like you, to choose times when our museum is not quite as populated so that they can definitely explore the space and not have some of those, other noises happening around them. But so for our synchronous events, we try to do it during the week in an afternoon. And then for our asynchronous or the self-directed times, again, we're hoping that the family, when they book their time to come, will choose what time works best for them. And then, Emily, did you want to talk a little bit about your virtual resources that families can engage with online on your website?
Sure. So we have some resources that are available that are, more specifically directed towards autism. Things like, people can at any time download our social story, or we have a whole page that has, tips and tricks for making a successful visit if you have a child, who has sensory needs. And then, I think much like the Nasher, for our general visitors, we also just have all sorts of resources for people to plan their visit and to figure out how they want to engage in the museum. It's important to us that people can come and engage in their own way and make it a personalized visit. So things like online where they can plan their tour or pick out works of art that they really want to see, find out if they're available. We have related teaching ideas or discussion points that go with those works of art. And of course, a calendar of events with, free events and activities happening, all the time, so that people can choose, when they want to come to the museum and how they want to participate.
And I know go ahead.
Well, one of the things for me as a person who doesn't represent any of the institutions, that I think that a benefit of a consortium is that the consortium partners can make clear to the other people who are coming into their event what considerations they need to have in their planning. A great example is the Dallas Zoo has a lot of restricted materials that are related to the safety of the animals, that if you didn't know that, you wouldn't think about the fact that you can't have straws in any of your crafting activities. You can't have styrofoam in anything because, it can blow into the animal enclosures and the animal could eat it. And I have to remind my students frequently that having wet things like paint and glue is a real factor, because then people have to carry these things around and they're going into a place where there's a lot of valuable art or whatever it is. And so an example is a student will say, oh, we have this really neat project that goes with the rock and roll theme, but it uses glue. And I'm saying, well, can you change it out and use glue dots? Or if it just have to have those 3 dots of glue, then I'm like, then we have to bring a hairdryer and do this outside. And so there are just certain factors that I think that having a sheet of considerations for each place, because each place is unique, that we would need to factor that in, like who can have bubbles, who can't have bubbles, who can have balls. Oh, no balloons at the zoo. All those things are factors, especially since the therapy students like to create a fine motor station and a gross motor station. So they might not realize you can't have fly swatters and bubbles inside, but you can have them in courtyards, you know, and so there's just a lot of things to think about. So let's stop this little session and we can pick up again with another one.
Great.